The Mayan civilization started in 2000 BC, ended in 1500 AD, and reached the peak of its power around the 6th century AD, around the rainforests, or bosques in Spanish, of the Yucatan area, which is now modern-day Central America. The largest and most used language in Western Maya is Celtal, and it is spoken in Chiapas, Mexico. The Yucatec languages, Yucatec, Itza, and Mopan, are also classified as Western Mayan languages, with Yucatec being the most important, spoken in Yucatan, Belize, Mexico, and northern Guatemala. This civilization, which was one of the most influencing of its time, made many advancements that have helped build the modern world, including improvements in astrology and time management, all using influences from religion, constellations, and the movements of the sun and moon.
The Mayans' knowledge and understanding about celestial bodies was very advanced for their time. They know how to predict solar eclipses and used astrological cycles to plan their planting and harvesting periods,
which resulted in successful abundances of crops and allowed large communities to feed their people all at once. The Mayans also invented chinampas, which were floating gardens made of riverbed grass and reeds, and were used to successfully harvest crops in communities that were near large bodies of water. There are also traces of evidence that prove that the Mayans used handmade rubber, taken from rubber trees and morning glory plants. They used this concoction and created household items and tools. Handmade glue, book bindings, and glittery paint made out of a mineral called mica were also used to better illustrate and assemble scripts. Made from complicated handmade looms, the Mayans also figured out how to weave water-resistant cloth. The Mayans are also well known for designing and building elaborate pyramids and temples, or piramides and templos in Spanish, without the help of any metal or the wheel. One of the more famous pyramids is called Kukulcan, which is located on Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. An abundance of Mayan cities and city-states were located on the Yucatan Peninsula, a shelf of flat land that rises above the Gulf of Mexico. Most Mayan cities weren't planned out in advance, so builders just added more buildings around them, expanding them whenever necessary. Because of this, the cities were usually irregularly shaped and lacked exact territorial boundaries. Chichen Itza, a pre-Columbian city-state built by the Mayans, is also located on the Yucatan Peninsula in Tinam Municipality. This dominant city-state, which was occupied during the end of the Classic period, was home of many famous structures including El Castillo, the Great Ball Court, and Los Monos. El Mirador, thriving from the 6th century BC up to the 1st century AD, was one of the first city-states. With a population of over 100,000 people, El Mirador had over 1,000 buildings and 3 large temples, named El Tigre, El Templo de los Guerreros, and La Danta. The Mayans were polytheistic, which means they believed in many gods. A few of the main gods that they worshipped included the sun god named Kini Uhuis, the maize god named Yum Cax, and the death god named Yum Simil. Religion was included into all facts of daily life and was the major unifying factor of the civilization. Having the intention of pleasing the gods, the Mayans practiced human sacrifices, or sacrificios in Spanish, and would often raid other communities to obtain victims, preferably children. Younger sacrificial children were desired because of their innocence, which was thought to be more appealing to the gods. Often, the Mayan people would engage in bloodletting rituals in which an individual would be cut and usually killed to release blood and please the gods. The most common approach to bloodletting rituals was to bring the victim to the top of a temple or pyramid, where he or she would be laid across a sacrificial altar. Then, with his or her arms and legs held down by others, a Nacum would open the chest and remove the heart with a knife, giving it to a priest to throw down the temple or pyramid stairs. Other methods of sacrifice included beating, drowning, cannibalism, and arrow rituals. In the arrow ritual, the victim would be painted entirely blue and tied to a stake, where he or she would remain as others attempted to shoot his or her heart with bows and arrows. Dance rituals done to honor nobles, animals, and retell certain political conflicts and origins of the world were also performed. The Popol Vuh, or the Book of the People, includes many Mayan myths and legends. These stories were used to tell and explain the origins and supernatural happenings of the universe. One of the more popular myths explains the creation of Earth and mankind. In this myth, before the world came into existence, there were only two gods. Their names were Tepeu, the creator, and Gukumatz, the great feathered spirit. These gods were the original gods of the whole entire universe. With the ability to form anything that came into their minds instantaneously, the two came together and created the suns, moons, planets, and stars that make up the galaxies. They then later decided that they would make the Earth and formulated different ideas about what kind of inhabitants they wanted living on their planet. After many attempts, they finally made the land, sky, plants, and animals that make up our Earth. After successfully formulating the Earth, the gods wanted to be admired and praised by the inhabitants of the planet, but being only animals and plants, the life on Earth couldn't devote themselves to Tepeu and Gukumatz. So the gods decided that they would create better beings, ones that would worship them properly. Their attempts consisted of trying to make men out of mud and then on the second try out of wood, both of which proved to be failures. The men made out of mud fell apart as soon as they were put together, and the men made out of wood had empty minds and couldn't focus on worshipping Tepeu and Gukumatz. Finally, on the third try, they successfully created humans out of a combination of corn and water, and were content with the religious abilities of this race. They then duplicated the original man into 4 and created 4 women and children out of their bodies. The Mayans also believed that the earth was flat and had 4 corners. At each of these corners, there was thought to be 4 jaguars that supported the sky, which were called Bacabes. The Mayan economy was almost entirely based on food and agriculture. Therefore, farming, which was fulfilled mainly by men, was the main form of labor. Agricultural produce, along with salt, cloth, honey, fruit, and domestic animals, was used to pay the government and to trade and buy goods. These animals were often traded and sold once or twice a week in a public market, usually in a field or flat area by a river. Using their homegrown produce, the Mayans would make tortillas, pakchuk, and a variety of sauces using beans, mushrooms, tomatoes, avocados, herbs, and more. Chocolate was also a big part of the food culture of the Mayans. By cultivating and using cacao beans, they would produce chocolate, which they used to add flavor to food and beverages. The Mayans developed a hierarchical government ruled by kings and priests and lived in independent city-states, which consisted of rural communities and large urban ceremonial centers. They had no standing army, but warfare played an important role in religion, power, and prestige. There are a few different theories that have been hypothesized about the downfall of the Mayans by professors and scholars.
Scholars believe the Mayans exhausted the environment around them until the land could no longer sustain a large population. The Mayans had constant warfare among themselves led to complicated military, family, and trade alliances to break down, along with a traditional system of dynamic power. An extremely long period of drought wiped them out.
In summary, the Mayans were an important and memorable people from Mesoamerica. Not only did they influence the food, clothes, and architecture that we eat, wear, and use today, but they also left a legacy of rich culture, achievements, artifacts, and astrological advancements for us to study and admire.